Sean, do you hear us?
I can hear you.
Nice. I hear you now, Sean. I hear you loud and clear.
Can you hear me?
Yep. I hear you. We hear you.
Yes, I hear you. Can you hear me?
Yep. Lagging, but it's okay.
What can you see?
Sorry? I only see me. I don't see you at all. Poor people. The poor listeners have to look at my face the whole time.
Can you see me?
We don't see you, Sean. No, we just hear you. John, you there? Do you want to continue your thoughts on the... Oh, no. We lost him again. Oh, man. Well, we knew again that this might be Sean because he's having connection issues. Okay, let's see. I'm going to message him real quick. We're seeing if we can figure this out, guys. We're going to get this because we want to hear Sean's opinion. Sean? Ground control to Major Sean. Sean is in the room and silent. Like many of our awkward friends, right? Everybody knows that guy. We appreciate you, Sean. I guess this is why the guys over at WM Review do written material, not podcast material. Though I'm not one to talk. I guess I am the king of connection issues. So I fully understand the problem with trying to go live when your internet is not working very well. But you guys in the comments, as we again, I think we may try to figure this out. Maybe Sean tries to take it on his phone. Let's try this. Sean, you there? I heard you for a second. What Sean didn't tell us is he's actually broadcasting from Stonehenge.
Can you guys hear me?
There he is. All right. There we go. Do you hear me, Sean? Maybe.
Trying to hotspot my phone. I figured just straight to the what do they call it? The organ grinder of the phone, rather than try to hotspot. So here we are.
Hey, it sounds better. You sound much better. I hear you now. I think maybe without a lag. That's awesome. I appreciate that.
Nice.
Cool. Okay, and maybe just pick up. As you said, you're really in a nice flow. I mean, and again, just back to, what you kind of take a middle ground, as you said. And it's something that the people that the hot takes, it's not very fun for social media because social media wants it to be extreme one way or the other. So again, maybe back to what's your opinion of it?
Yeah, listen, I got so much nuance. I could be supplying it to Michael Lofton if he needs any. Yeah, so middle ground. Yeah, you could put it that way. What I was saying is that I think our impressions of Charles III and whoever else is not really very important. For a start, I said, I don't know whether anyone's ever going to hear what I said before, but we know that what we see in politics isn't really what's going on. We know that the people who we see are not necessarily the ones making the decisions, and that a lot's going on behind the scenes that we don't see. And so when the Queen died, it was very strange for me to see all the people sort of coming out saying how grateful they were to her, or alternatively how terrible she was. And I just thought, really, what is the truth here? What's actually going on here? And I think really the point that we need to kind of keep in mind in understanding our monarchy, at least in England and the rest of the United Kingdom, is that it's not about what the monarch does, it's about what he is. So what he is in our constitution is the principle of all civil authority. So let's just rewind a little bit. The purpose of any kind of state is to maintain peace and to secure the common good. That's something like that is what Aristotle and then St. Thomas say, and that's the purpose of a state. And there's three main ways, or you could say four maybe, three main ways that that's done. It can be done by one man, it can be done by several men, or it can be done by all men. And when that is ordered towards the ends I said, maintaining peace and the common good, is either a monarchy, an aristocracy, or a democracy. So that's how it's defined, and they're all legitimate forms of government. And then I said fourth because you could have some kind of mix of the three of them in more or less different combinations. And then when according to that kind of layout of things, when the government is not maintaining peace and and trying to secure the common good, they'd call it a tyranny, an oligarchy, or I forget the word. Maybe I'm mixing up democracy and the bad form, But basically, the point is that governance by all, with elections and different things like that, is not per se a bad thing. The question is it achieving the ends for which society has been instituted or not? So we could have any form of government, and you in Germany and in America as well have your own forms of government. We have ours, and under our constitution, the monarch is the principle of all authority, all civil authority that is exercised. That's why it's called His Majesty's government. That's why the various ministers and so on are his ministers. They're exercising his authority. And then we have the various different things, like everyone's favourite, His Majesty's Revenue and Customs. That's who we pay our taxes to, and so on. So that's the kind of the layout of the Constitution. And to some degree, some people would look at that and say this is a legal fiction, because basically, the monarch doesn't get involved in those things and is not really allowed to by constitutional convention. And that is true. But the point is that the authority that is exercised in his name, and even if they all think it's a fiction and a con and so on, we know from the New Testament and from Catholic theology and different things that all authority comes from God. All civil authority comes from God. In our constitution, it comes from the monarch, who must in turn then have received it from who? From God. So that's why the monarch is the principle of authority, and he's the principle of all the good things that we want in a society: law, order, and so on. Now, these things can be abused by the various governments and office holders and so on, and there's not really anything that the monarch does to like in this department to have a claim on our gratitude or anything. But do you see what I mean? That it's not about being grateful to him or being afraid of what is going to happen, or hating him because he's related in some way to the WEF or something or whatever. It's about what he is. Does that make sense?
Totally. And it's something that we've talked about almost years ago now on the podcast. They covered the topics of patriotism and nationalism and the issues with rebellion. I mean, I better be really careful what I say with a Brit on the podcast talking about rebellion, but it's a really interesting topic, and it's something that, again, that I think Americans have to take really seriously, and not just follow along with what they're taught in school, because that's not necessarily the actual Catholic teaching. Obviously, I mean, that should be pretty obvious, and I think there are a lot of these things that we don't really understand. And I didn't understand until I moved to Europe and I started to see, oh, this is interesting. This is how other people view Americans in America. And it made me have to, rethink kind of the entire thing, and rethink monarchy, and rethink, what is, the valid authority. And it's a really tough topic, because again, it's almost subjective, I think, because, the issue being that you must obey your lawful authority to a certain point. And I guess that certain point is a little hard to define. And I guess that's what, your people right now have an issue with Charles, King Charles or Queen Elizabeth, because they think, well, they push that certain point partly because, well, they're not Catholic or they're Freemasons or whatever. And I think that's pretty undefined. And I think that's a really dangerous road, because if you start going down there, you start become rebellions towards any authority and you overthrow them. What do you replace them with? Right. And that's typically the question.
Yeah, that's really interesting questions. I've been thinking about the question of the rebellion, given how many Americans seem to have this very visceral dislike for the House of Windsor, and this sort of quasi magic view of how the Stuart succession should work. And I've been wondering whether there's some kind of connection between wanting to justify the American Revolution and the continuing existence of the United States, and feeling that the only way that can be justified is if George III and the kings of over here were somehow illegitimate themselves, as if the Stuart line had continued, then the American Revolution would have been unjustified and so on, but it didn't, therefore it's all okay. Whereas I just sort of look at this and I think, well, I think we all look at it and say, well, good luck to the Americans. You know, you've had your revolution, you've secured your government. It's quite clear who the government of that that particular landmass is, and so in a sense there's a sort of right of conquest going on there, and what may have started or may not have started, I'm not even going to get into it, but even if it started as illegitimate, it clearly has become legitimate through the passing of time and the securing of the rights over that land and the rights of governance. There's a kind of interim period, and you can see this with the Jacobite issues. There's an interim period where a usurper can be, or where there's a question: is it possible for this usurper to be removed and replaced with the person who we think is like the rightful claimant? But then a certain time passes, and we're not living in Middle Earth, much as we might wish we were. The monarchy is not a magic thing. It is just a form of government. It's a natural institution like the state, and in a sense, it kind of is related to some of the stuff we talk about with relation to the crisis in the church about peaceful and universal adherence. We say that when a man claiming to be pope enjoys peaceful and universal acceptance of his office, then we know that he is, even if there might have been problems in the election and so on, as Cardinal Bio points out. Even if there were problems in how he got there, at a certain point we can look at the situation and say, however he got there, he's the Pope. And I think that is perhaps a helpful way of looking at the Jacobite situation as well as the American Revolution situation.
Yeah, exactly. And eventually, again, I think it's pretty clear, the teaching, and it comes straight from Christ himself, right? That, I mean, do we think that the Roman government at the time of Christ was this great, wonderful, oasis of goodness? But Christ said, yeah, render under Caesar. And I think, but that's actually a question I had for you. So, and I think that that's clear to me. It's clear to me that rebellion in most terms is bad, and I'd say sinful even. And that's clearly teaching of the church, because you can't rebel against a legitimate authority in most cases. Now, occasionally it's because the government's bad enough, etc. Now, my question to you is that I've seen you and others, what's the word, praising or kind of hailing, acting like it's a very good thing with King Charles. Now, do you think is that separate? Because to me, that's kind of like, maybe that's too far. Rather than just saying, I accept him, he's the king, it's good to have a legitimate authority, but to say it's a good thing, I mean, how would you express that?
I would say it's a good thing to have a king. It's a good thing to have a legitimate authority, just like it's a good thing for you to have a president. Now, I'm not going to pretend to know how exactly the inner workings of the American Constitution and American government works. I don't know how much. Perhaps it's the case that the president has more say in what goes on, because, I mean, let's be clear, our monarch has basically no say whatsoever. There might be behind the scenes conversations. The monarch has the right to be informed and to warn and so on about governmental policies, but by and large, the monarch is not governing in that sense. But it is good that we have a monarch, because it's they, as I said, that is the principle by which we have authority in our land. That said, I mean, I say there is a sort of a tension of some sort, I suppose, because I mean, as soon as in our constitution, as soon as the Queen dies, the King, it becomes the King. There's no interregnum in the English Constitution. You know, we might want to say the United Kingdom Constitution. I guess you know, someone else can split hairs there. But the point is that we don't have an interregnum. So in a sense, we were never without a monarch. So we haven't been given one after an absence of one. If you see what I mean. I think when we say "God save the King" and things like that, we're wishing him well. We're glad that we live in a country that's governed by law mostly. You know, these things are eroded all the time. And I'm not going to play around with counterfactual saying, oh, well, if we didn't have a king, it would be worse or something like that. That's irrelevant. The point is that this is our constitution. He is our king. We wish him well. And I mean, you know, we could sort of branch off into a different discussion here, which is that although we had a revolution, and we call it it's called by the establishment the Glorious Revolution, by which James II was deposed and replaced with the Protestants William and Mary, who the WM Review is not named after them, just to clarify.
Good to hear.
You know, so we had that, but what's basically happened is that all of our institutions are by and large intact from a kind of functioning monarchy, you could say. I mean, for the process of having a constitutional monarchy was going on well before the so-called Glorious Revolution. More and more, the king was governing, you know, making laws in Parliament rather than just by like fiat, like some sort of dictator and so on. But my point is that our institutions are by and large intact, and you know, is not going to happen. But in theory, all of these powers in the legislature, the judiciary, and the executive can all be drawn back into the one man from whom they come, which is, you know, the king. And you know, we could have a functioning monarchy again. So in a sense, you could say that we are preserving a monarchy, even if it is acting and looking as if it's a democracy, and for all intents and purposes it is, and a bad one. But it has all the institutions in place to start again at some
So in
point.
other words,
I mean,
you're saying it's materially a monarchy, but formally not. Okay, we're not going to get into that. But
let's just say I've got my own thesis on the matter.
Right. But it's really interesting because I think I really appreciate that, because I think it's a really interesting definition, because as you say, really they don't have any power whatsoever, so they actually aren't really in an authority. So you don't really have to treat them with respect to an authority, but it's almost the potential of authority and the potential of a better authority, which I think is it's a very romantic thing. But see, that's part of why I like it, because I think I've been studying a lot into British history lately because it fascinates me, and I think it's something that if you don't study it, you don't understand that the Americans just can't. They can't understand. You can't get it. You know, I mean, if you're born as an American, and it's a good thing. I'm very proud to be an American, but it's a very different history, and it's a very much shorter. You know, it's always been a democracy. I mean, there's a lot of things that are just totally different. Not always been a democracy, but you get my point. And I think that the British history there's something so much more romantic about it, and about the monarchy, where you do have that hope where. Yeah, what if, you know, there's that what if you have a great king who says, okay, you know, I'm going to take back all that power and make it a great Catholic monarchy again. And obviously it's probably not going to happen, but it's a nice thought.
Yeah, I mean, we are in sort of real romantic fantasy land with that, at least for the foreseeable centuries. But it's definitely true. I want to say as well that I love America, and there's a lot to love and respect about America and different institutions in America. But let's pour some cold water on the romance and then see what's left of it at the end. So I've just published an essay, really kind of dealing with the idea of Walter Bagehot. So Walter Bagehot is a very, very influential English constitutionalist from the 19th century. so influential that, as far as we're told, his ideas are the ideas of our monarchs and of our government and so on. And I think it's really quite a, if you take it as a sort of taxative kind of, this is the full explanation of things, it's really dark, right? It's really dark. So it goes like this. Talking about the legislature and the judiciary and the executive and separation of powers, the different powers of government, is a red herring. The real distinction is between what he calls the dignified and the efficient. So the efficient parts of and the institutions of government are the things that actually get on and govern. They're where the decisions are made. I'm massively oversimplifying this, and there's crossover, but they're the things that make the decisions and execute them, and probably execute us as well in due course. The dignified are the things that kind of are designed to overawe the masses in order to assist them in being governed by the efficient parts of and institutions of government. So the idea essentially is that things like the monarchy and you know, America and other countries as well are going to have their own forms of this, but nothing's quite as striking as what we've seen in the last few hours, really, in terms of dignity and so on. The dignified parts of government, like the monarchy and anointing him with oil and all these different things, this is all basically a sham. I don't think they would put it this way, I'm simplifying it, but this is like a sort of sham to make us go along with the laws. And so you could really boil it down and really put it darkly and say that today's coronation is basically to assist Matt Hancock, our health secretary, you know, making you take certain, you know, medicines, if you know what I mean. I gather you can't talk about things totally openly here, and obviously that's anachronistic, you know, but talk about Charles and Hancock, but you know, that's the idea, and that's dark, but there's definitely a truth to it, and you can definitely see that. You know, I saw on the news yesterday, rare watching of the news, somebody saying that meeting King Charles was the greatest moment of her life. And I just thought, how sad, you know, but I believe it, you know, and but that's how sad is that? And why is it sad? It's sad because in a sense, like they've kind of, there is a mythology around our monarchy, which definitely is used to make government work, and that's not such a bad thing. Government does need to work. It is open to abuse, of course, and is frequently abused, especially in our times. But that's essentially the dynamic that's put forward by Badger, and they all think it's for the, you know, for the greater good and so on. No one, well, few people think they're evil, do they? But you know, some people know they are. But you know, that's kind of the dynamic there. So that is the cold water, and once you see that, it's very difficult to unsee it. When you see, you know, it's difficult then to go to a street party afterwards and listen to people talk about what a wonderful man Charles is. Like I don't even want to kind of dispute whether he is or he isn't a wonderful man, but they, you know, they don't know it.
Right. Oh, I think maybe we lost. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Did you lose me?
We lost you for a second, but you're back.
Okay. So that's the cold water. And you could take that as a really reductive view, and it's clear that some people do think it's really reductive, and well, they think it's true and reductive. They think that the monarchy exists sort of like an opium for the masses, as basically. But what can we salvage from this kind of dark view? I think we can salvage what we find in Revelation from our Lord and from St. Paul and you know, elsewhere, that civil authority is a real thing. It does come from God. It is willed by God, and you know, there it is. They want to look at it in sort of materialistic terms. Let them. Even if the king, let's say the king fully buys into like the darkest, most reductive view of this possible, let him. The reality is that civil authority comes from God. Charles has been given that civil authority by which our country is governed directly and immediately by God, for him to thus delegate as our constitution works. And that's real. And so you could say that to these guys, monarchy is a conspiracy to get us down. But I would say there's a deeper conspiracy by which we as Catholics can know that no, it's not. It's not a conspiracy. It's real. There is something real here. There's a lot of fakery around it, and Anglican archbishops and all this nonsense. But and the pomp and circumstance has its particular purposes. But at the bottom of it, there's something real, which is civil authority is good and it's from God.
Right. Yeah, and exactly, and it's something that it took me a while to grasp that with Joe Biden, because I don't think he was elected properly. I think there was plenty of cheating that went on. I'm totally convinced of that. But again, as you say, eventually, once he's accepted, unfortunately, by the masses, then he is a legitimate authority. And now you don't follow him into evil or into sin, obviously, of course, but it doesn't also mean that you go and you buy a bunch of howitzers and go to war with Washington DC, because it's just not. I mean, first of all, because it doesn't make any sense. I know that was one of the when we were talking about this before on a different podcast, that it was one of the things that why you wouldn't go into a rebellion is if it's not practical. If you couldn't win, if it's kind of a lunatic idea, it's just throwing your life away, and that is also, again, that is absolutely. I don't know. I don't want to say forbidden, but for sure the church says, hey, no, that's not the way. You grin and you bear it. And this is what I tend to ask people. People will say, hey, what are we going to do? If the government does this, what do we do? Do we stack up on guns? Say, well, how many saints have you heard of that died during a rebellion? Have you heard of that died as martyrs? I mean, let's just be real here. I mean, and I think that's got to be a question that we ask ourselves. And I think part of it has to do with, again, they said, okay, this is a legitimate authority. They're evil. Maybe I'm going to die, but so be it. Then I die. Then I die for my faith and I die for my beliefs.
Yeah, I mean, it's a cliche at this stage, unfortunately for the saint. But there's St. Thomas's. Was it St. Thomas More? Forget now. His famous saying that he dies the king's good servant, but God's first. Yeah, he wasn't,
Right.
declaring the king to have been deposed and so on. I think there's a tendency amongst some of us who have our views on Francis Bergoglio to kind of act as if like every kind of institution of authority works like the papacy. It just doesn't. If a man's not Catholic, then he's not the Pope. But that doesn't work like that for the monarchy of the United Kingdom.
Right.
Exactly. So and if you say that we say that the Pope could lose office under certain circumstances. It just doesn't work like that in the United Kingdom. So, not every institution's the same. We're used to pouring scorn on the bad dad analogy with relation to the papacy, but the reality is that the analogy is based on something true, which is that no matter what a biological father does, he does remain the biological father, and that analogy is much more fitting for our monarchy and certain other institutions.
Absolutely. No, I think it's well said, and I appreciate you coming on despite the connection issues. And I know you're a busy man, and I am as well. I hear one of the babies crying in the background, so I better get running. But Sean, I really appreciate it. Again, anyone who appreciates Sean, I appreciate you coming on, Sean. I've been asking you for a long time, so I'm glad.
Yeah, it's one of those rare moments where it's like the stars are all aligned and Jupiter's in the right place. It's like, right, let's do it.
It worked out. No, it was great. It was really great to hear your opinions, because again, I think it's important, and I think it's important for all of us to remember when you start seeing all these hot takes about pretty much anything. Take a minute. I mean, just take a minute. Flat Earth, whatever it is, just step back. And don't get caught up in it. Don't just because someone with a blue check mark on Twitter says, the King of England is a reptile, calm down, and think about it. And I think really importantly, talk to somebody who might have a better grasp of it, which again, that's why we came to you, because I know you're a well-spoken guy. I know you've got material written on it, which we just shared on the YouTube comments. I'll share it once this goes, once it's published to YouTube, I'll share those links as well. But please go check out the material over at wmreview.co.uk. It's really, I can't recommend it enough to everybody. Really good stuff that covers a myriad of different topics. Very, very consistent. I really appreciate it with you guys, that you guys are very consistent with producing material, which I fully understand is not easy when you also have your own lives to live.
Yeah, so, it can be a struggle.
Oh, totally. Well, Sean, do you have any last words before we
Yeah,
go?
I want to leave you with one last thing. I don't know if you can hear that bird song. I'm just standing in the
Beautiful.
woods here right now. But anyway, just leave you one last thing. This is going to sound really strange to some people, but the reality is that this coronation does have the capacity to show us something about our Lord, right? And that's going to be very difficult for people who all they can see when they look at the king are his big fingers and associations with the WEF, right? But I get that. But if you look at Saint Ignatius's spiritual exercises, he's got the classic meditation about the call of the king, which starts with putting before our eyes a temporal king who summons his subjects to a noble crusade to liberate, the Holy Land and to conquer all the infidels and so on. And he moves from that parable to having us kind of understand something more about Christ. And and he thinks about the eternal king after that. And I think, how often do we get to see a real life king? And that's what we've seen today. We've seen a real life king go from being clothed in a simple tunic to all the fineries. And if we can just kind of get past what we all know and we all agree and we're not disputing about the different associations and so on, we have the capacity to see something really beautiful that can perhaps be fed into the mixer for our prayer and our meditation from St. Ignatius. And I know that might sound shocking to some people, but there it is.
No, I appreciate it. I like thinking differently like that, and I think, yeah, think big, and I think don't get stuck down in these hot takes of despair and destruction, because sometimes even God can work the best good out of even bad events and even bad kings. So let's keep that in mind, and let's pray for the king. I mean very seriously. Let's talk about someone who could have a very huge amount of pull or weight, to change the world. It's someone like him, someone like Joe Biden too. Let's not forget that as well. Let's pray for our leaders. I mean, we pray that in the litany of the saints. We should pray it, as often as possible.
Yeah,
How else are we going to get out of this? It's not going to be through voting, as we
exactly,
found out.
exactly. There's
Right?
not many people who receive full civil authority for the whole nation directly and immediately from God. In fact, there's only one in our nation anyway. Um, and yeah, so there it is. And I mean, what I think not many people know outside of this country is that every Sunday after the principal mass, we for a long time, a very long time, we sing a kind of antiphon anthem thing as a prayer for the monarch. So the idea that it's somehow un-Catholic to do that is just not true. So there we are. Thank you very much for having me, though, Kevin. It's been great to finally get on here.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Well, I'm going to get you on here again sometime, John. Whenever the stars
Definitely.
align, we'll get you on again. Awesome. I
Great.
appreciate it. Everyone, again,
Me too.
please go check them out, wmreview.co.uk. If you like this podcast, please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And we will see you all next time. Thank you guys who also joined us in the comment section. We appreciate you. And we'll see you next time.